going to be having a conversation today. And guess what? The guest is already on standby. He is an events management consultant. His name is Dr. Yemi Amuson. And we're talking about the face of event planning and management post-COVID. Hello, Dr. Yemi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good
Doing
to have
great.
you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Uh, yeah, thank you. Before we delve into the conversation, how are you holding up this season?
Well, it's been good. We have our good days and we have our not so good days. Of course, there's a lot of anxiety around, and one has to filter the amount of information one gets from the media. As much as we love you guys, not everything getting too much information is not a good thing. And so, trying to stay healthy, stay fit, stay mentally healthy as well. So it's good. Thankfully, we're all safe, and we're thankful.
Much, sir. I have Oluwayemi Sigbile here with me.
Hi, Dr. Amy. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me once again.
All right, let's quickly move into this. Before COVID-19, we all used to hear different adverts, different events, seminars, conferences, concerts, all sort of events everywhere. In fact, there was almost no weekend where you didn't have one party or the other to go to, one Owambe to show up to. People were rushing tailors to make dresses and all of that. Now, since the outbreak of COVID-19, of course, social distancing and all of that, how has this affected the world of event planning and management? How has it affected it? What's the impact that COVID-19 has on the sector?
Well, as with every industry, the impact has been quite immense. One of the things that we are very known for in this environment, we're very community-based, very family-oriented, very together in what we do. So naturally, the impact on our events in terms of our ability to gather, to come together, has been severely impacted. But it's not just something we're seeing in this environment. Around the world, the impact has been quite immense. Major events have been canceled. We heard about the Olympics. We heard about, most of the sporting seasons have been canceled. And it's actually something that is causing everybody in the event space, whether you do commercial events, whether you do social events or corporate events, is causing everybody to have to go back to the drawing board to figure a new, efficient, but safe way to run the same kind of events that we used to run. So the impact has been quite immense.
Wow, we know that this is not the first time a pandemic is happening. And of course, as long as human beings still exist on Earth, this won't be the last time it will happen. So how should event planners, plan for seasons like this? What should be included in event contracts and all of that? How should they plan for seasons like this?
Well, there are two sides to it. One of the things that is important to always bear in mind is that event planning is a service. It's something you do not as a transaction just to make money, but it's something that you do as a service for either the client if it's a direct, or for the community if it's something that the community benefits from. And so when looking at preparations for this, I think there are measures that should be put in place that bear in mind health and safety and environment on all events. I also believe that the need to ensure safety for your attendees or the attendees of any event is a basic requirement that must be put in place on regardless of the season. Now, when it comes to preparing and safeguarding against events like these, I imagine this is what lawyers would call a force majeure, in the sense that these are the sort of circumstances that affect both parties and make it difficult for both parties to do what they initially set out to do. So having a contract, an agreement, a memorandum of understanding is a first step that event planners and people in the event space should begin to do. Now, the agreement should be something that protects both parties, because on one hand, you do want to protect your livelihood, but on the other hand, you must remember that it is a service that you are providing for your client base. And so it's something that is compassionate, something that is understanding for them. One of the things that has happened to a lot of events that have been cancelled is it has led to a loss of income, and this has brought up the conversation of legal agreements and can you still insist that clients pay the money if it's not your fault. I think in terms of dealing with these sort of issues, there needs to be a lot of common sense, a lot of understanding on both parties, and where it's possible to have clauses in place where events are postponed rather than cancelled outright. That's something that can be looked at. But when it comes to this particular pandemic, the truth is we are in virgin territory. Nobody has really, gone through something like this before, and so we are learning as we are moving along. And I believe that there'll be a lot of notes that we would have taken at the end of this once we come through, that will put us in a better position to plan effectively ahead.
Now, a lot of events have either been postponed or cancelled, and with no option of refund, for those who bought tickets and all of that. Now, there are still some events that were lined up since last year for later months in the year. And we really don't know when COVID-19 is going to say bye-bye, because it's beginning to look like it's the new normal for us all. So the question is, what should an event planner do for maybe an event that has already been, a lot of things have been purchased in towards that event? Say the down payment has been used to purchase something, half of the money, half of the budget has been sent, have been paid to purchase other things, to put some things in place. So what should that event planner do? Is it to refund the money or to return the goods, which is probably not likely? I mean, what should an event planner do finding themselves in that fix?
Well, to start off with, as you said, this is most likely going to be the new normal, as that it is not feasible for things to go back to exactly the way they were before all of this, started. Now, I think that the first thing is to have a conversation with the client, depending on the sort of event it is. The larger scale events would normally have a contract of some sort if it was planned properly. So the contract will be the guidelines. But even at that, it needs to be a conversation that is conducted in a way that bears, a measure of understanding for both parties. In cases where it is possible, a lot of event planners, event creators are asking the clients to postpone, not to cancel outright. And in cases where tickets have been purchased for concerts, they're asking the attendees or the would-be attendees not to cancel the ticket or not to request for a refund if possible, but to hold the ticket, and so that when the event is scheduled, whether it's a few months or in the next year, that ticket will be honored. Now, this is an important thing to consider, because if everybody refunds all the monies that have been paid for events, the event industry will literally collapse in and of itself. And that's not something that everybody wants. And so there is going to have to be a dialogue and a measure of understanding. Where possible, it might be inevitable that funds will have to be returned. But I will also say, where it is possible, if clients should look to ways that they can postpone the event, just so that the event companies don't go under. As you mentioned, once funds are paid, contrary to some belief, all the money doesn't go into the event planner's pocket. Most of those funds actually go to procure the elements that are required. And some of these elements are non-refundable. And so if all the monies have to be refunded, then you're asking the event companies to refund out of pocket. And that's just the stark reality. So I do think dialogue is important. I think understanding on both parties. And I will say where possible, events that shouldn't be cancelled outright, they should be postponed. We see that happening with a lot of the large concerts, a lot of the sporting events, including the Olympics, which was not possible to cancel it. So they've postponed it till next year, I believe. And that's the sort of conversation that needs to start happening between the clients or the attendees and the organizers.
Let me quickly chip this in for the sake of vendors, party vendors, wedding planners, and all of that. Some people are still getting married regardless, but they are not gathering large crowds of people in the same hall. It's just the husband, the wife, probably immediate family members that they've been quarantined together. And then there's, I think the Ministry of Interior also has, assists with that. They get married and they move on with that. Now, so for someone whose wedding is coming up, say in June, and the person has, planned ahead, put all things in place, what should these wedding vendors do? Because this is pretty much like their source of livelihood. So what should they do? I mean, for future purposes, knowing fully well that we have to start considering COVID-19 now in everything we do. So what should the little, and the big events, it's very easy because there's a contract or not to go by. There are guidelines. But for small events that really don't have contracts, what should they do?
Well, as much as the idea of small events not having contracts, I do believe that as basic as it may be, there needs to be some sort of understanding between the client and the event planner. This is going to be a necessity going forward because there's always an assumption that everything's going to work out fine. But life is an interesting journey, and there are many twists and turns on the road. So I would say going forward, this is contracts, agreements, as basic as they are. It could be a few lines, just stating a memorandum of understanding, if you like, or some sort of terms. This is the basis under which we're collecting your money or we're taking your money to do this event. These are the things that we can control. These are the things that we cannot control. This is a reality. And as far as events go, we are waking up to a new reality. And the thing about realities is that they're not sympathetic to feelings or emotions or how you want to go about doing things. The reality is simply what it is. And we have to adapt. Every industry has to adapt to it. I think going forward, most of these events are going to be planned differently. They're going to be organized very differently. On the one side, you have the event planner creating the environment that is safe, not overcrowding spaces, making sure that there are facilities to wash hands and distance the guests as effectively as possible. Making sure that things like catering, things like decor, where there's inevitable touching of things, are handled in the most hygienic way, making sure that there are tests and health and safety are considered on all fronts. But on the side of the clients as well, there has to be an understanding that events cannot go forward like they used to. On one hand, this is a great incentive to save costs in terms of the number of people that you invite to your wedding, because it's no longer feasible to have everybody and their uncles and aunties from the village, come over. And that on one side can be a good thing, but also the duration of events, what we do when we get into an event space, how we entertain our guests, things like, packaged food, prepackaged food, and, making sure that, everybody does what they came to do in the most efficient manner, and then everybody goes back home. Not hugging as one would also want to do. This is going to be a relearning curve. It's going to be an experience that is at first going to be uncomfortable, But one of the great things about the human race is that we adapt, and we will adapt. We will evolve. I think our events will become more efficient. I think they will become healthier, and I think a lot of the excesses that we used to put into our events, especially on this continent, are going to be curbed as a function of necessity.
Now, prior to COVID-19, prior to the outbreak, the WHO had some regulations concerning social gatherings and mass gatherings, which were not really adhered to in this part of the world. Now that it has happened, we really have to, maintain social distancing. We have to make sure that there are health workers at each event at the end of the day, because of course COVID-19 has called for it. Do you think when COVID eventually gets relegated to the background, all these things will still hold water? Because of course it wasn't even enforced by WHO. Do you think they will still hold water after COVID-19?
I think that it's impossible to um, once you have seen something and experienced something, even if you're experiencing it via the media, it's impossible to ignore the reality of its existence. In the initial months of COVID-19, there were conversations as to whether, oh, it's just like a bad cold, or it's like a flu, or it is not as serious as people think. There were conspiracy theories about it being a hoax and being tied to 5G and all of that. Now, regardless of what your belief system is as to the cause, the reality is that it is an extremely contagious, an extremely infectious disease. Yes, the mortality rate has to be put in context with the numbers, but the fact that it's that contagious, and it's an extremely uncomfortable disease to have to experience yourself. This is a caution that goes out. So there will be the tendency to sort of relapse and go back, but the argument to insist that health and safety measures, which, as I mentioned earlier, should have been in place or should be in place regardless, has been made. The case has been made very strongly. There is evidence, there is data. And so these are measures that I believe will be in place. Yes, I believe that as human beings, our tendency is to sort of relax and go back into hugging and whatnot. And there is nothing wrong with that in the long term, once there is a sense of whether there's a vaccination or whether there's a proper treatment and whatnot. But the fact remains that every event practitioner, every event organizer has a moral responsibility to ensure that health, safety, and environmental issues are taken into consideration. Hygiene. I don't think our hands have ever been as clean as they have been in the last 3 months. And this is a reality that we have come to live with. Now, washing hands it has become almost second nature to most of us, and this is what is going to happen going forward. And so, as far as health, safety, and environment are concerned, these are measures that must be enforced. And I suspect that sooner than later we will begin to see legislation insisting that certain measures are taken into consideration. Health checks are made on a regular basis, because whilst COVID-19 was a new a disease that was discovered in 2019, the science suggests to us that this is something that is likely to happen again, and several times, because for long it has been mentioned that a disease like this, an infectious pathogen, viral pathogen, is likely going to occur sooner than later. Hopefully the world is better prepared for the next outbreak. But as far as this one is concerned, there are lessons that have to be learned, and those lessons must stick with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yemi Amusan, this morning. One parting shot before you go. So your recommendation is post-COVID, every event has to have a contract to define what can be controlled and what can't be controlled, and what liability the event planner would take on, and what they won't take on. Is that your take?
Well, yes, but not just that. A contract, covers is basically to establish the fairness of the arrangement, and so both parties need to be covered by it. The clients, especially for social events, need to get used to signing some sort of commitment because everything cannot rise and fall on the fact that we have relationships or we are friends, and so that's something that is going to have to happen going forward. But it's not just liabilities. It is the fairness, the language and the intent is that it is a fair agreement to both parties, and that yes, there are some things that are simply out of our control that might impact our ability to go forward with this, and that refers to both cases, both parties.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Dr. Yemi. We had a very nice conversation with you.
Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your show. Thank you.
Bye.